Welcome to the Channeling Spirit Virtual Summit, a platform where we have invited Spirit to share messages, healings, and transmissions with all of us. May this energetic experience help us to expand our awareness and to deepen the relationship we have with our higher self, our spiritual team, and with Source, however we define them. Thank you for being here and for taking part in this amazing journey. Hello and welcome to the Channeling Spirit Virtual Summit. My name is Daniel Martinez Stahl. This is Season 8, Episode 7 with Joe Monkman. Joe's been with us in the past as well, so for those of you that have been following along, you'll recognize him. As always, I will let Joe introduce himself to you guys, and then we will go from there.
Okay. So, like Daniel said, I'm Joe Monkman, and I have been, it's been a good 30 years of doing this kind of spiritual work, being on the spiritual practice, which includes channeling, shamanic healing, other kinds of intuitive work. So it's been a long road, and I can't believe it's been 30 plus years. I don't know where the hell the time has gone. I was 27 when, things cracked open in me. I'd been playing around a lot with meditation and reading stuff by Edgar Cayce and, Many Lives, Many Masters, all that kind of work. But it was the shamanic work. It was through meditation that I had a big wake up in 1993. And then I met my shamanic teachers. And that was a path that was really kind of chosen for me. I wasn't seeking out shamanism by any stretch of the imagination. I really didn't know what it was. But it was the vehicle that took me deeper and into some terrifying places inside me, which is, I think, part of the whole understanding of surrender for me. And that was a big journey inward. And then I started doing things in nature with trips to Peru and the Inca Trail and being in the Andes Mountains with some great teachers and healers there, and doing vision quests, which really pushed, the surrender button a little bit harder every time. So so we're going to talk about surrender today. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how to be in that process. And what's that saying that let go or be dragged or something really.
I haven't heard that one, but
oh my gosh, yeah,
let go and be free. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
We can make one up.
Yeah. Let go or be dragged. Yeah. So we're going to talk about letting go and how to be more peaceful in the process, because, if you're going through a process, and we all kind of go like this sometimes in and out of it, can be a kind of a roller coaster. And then we're like, good, I have the week off or the month off or 6 months off from this process. And, someone else that is going through some heavy duty stuff. And you're like, oh, good, it's not my turn. I'll just support them. And then suddenly, boom, the universe comes along and goes, hi, I know you just read this email, and guess what? Because that happened to me yesterday. That's why I'm using that example, which is why I wasn't on with you yesterday, because I got an email early in the morning that just flipped me in all sorts of way, inside out, in a really good way. So
we're glad to have you.
That's why we did it. 8:30 last
glad to have you with us today.
Yes. But I thought, oh, what great fodder for tomorrow. That's what I was thinking as I went to bed last night.
You know what I would love to start with, and this is a little off topic, but it's related to something that you do and something that you're familiar with, and it came to mind as you were doing your intro. I wish I would have kept this article years ago, I read an article about a shamanic practitioner, a PhD doctor of some sort, who was also a shamanic researcher. So he would go around the world and study all different kinds of shamanic practices and cultures and things. And he wrote an article that talked about how people that are suffering from mental illness, and I'm generalizing this and I'm completely paraphrasing this because this was years ago, but people that suffer from mental illness are people that are energetically powerful that haven't learned how to utilize their power. And it's creating dissonance inside their system because they haven't learned how to channel, how to flow, how to understand all of the incredible energy that's within them. And I loved that idea. I remember reading that and being really impacted by that concept. Because I know that a lot of times I'll talk about how we all have innate mental health within us. And this is a big conversation within the Three Principles community. Our mental health is a figment of our imagination in the sense that we get caught up in the noise in our head and we don't understand how the mind is working. We don't understand how it is that the thoughts that we are thinking are literally creating our experience, and how we can utilize our free will to have a different relationship with the energy of thought that is working through us, not just our personal thinking, but also the energy of thought, which is a different conversation altogether. But because I have that foundational understanding from that description, when I read this article, I was just really floored by it because it gave another perspective to this idea that mental dissonance in our head is nothing more than you are a powerful being and no one has shown you what to do with it.
Yeah, I will say that in 1993, when I had my big wake-up experience and I started to have what, you could describe as very spontaneous psychic experiences that, I'd see things, I would just brush up against someone and then it would just be this whole series of images would fly through my head in black and white, and it was like past, present, future possibilities, right? And it really started to scare me. And also, things would come out of my mouth that I didn't, it just, that no one asked for this information, but it would just fly out of my mouth uncensored, and I really started to question my mental health. I remember staying up all night. I had two dogs at the time, and I was living in Jersey City, New Jersey, downtown, and I was sitting on my front steps of this brownstone at dawn in the summertime going, geez, I think maybe I've crossed a line here and maybe I'm going crazy. Maybe I need to go to the nut house. I don't know. And that's when, very shortly after that, someone said, hey, I heard what's happening with you. And I think I know someone who can help you. But I also, and when I first talked to that person, my teacher, Rosa, she said, oh, Joe, how old are you? What's happening? Oh, do you think you're going crazy? And I said, oh my gosh, yes. She said, oh, that's good. And oh, geez, is it? But someone recently sent me an article, and I wish I had my phone on because I would look it up. But it's there's a man out there in the world, I think he's American, who treats people who have mental illness, quote unquote, mental illness, and they're not on medication. They're not medicated. And he goes and sits with them and talks to them and listens to them. And apparently has been having good results by just being the person who sits and listens and dialogues. And I read quite a few articles in the 90s about these kind of things where they would say, well, if I'm going to paraphrase like 400 articles right now, they would say, well, we don't have in our American culture, in our society, a way to cultivate gifts that people have, psychic abilities, shamanic gifts. It's not woven into our culture. Whereas, I know a shaman, his name is Puma. He's on Sounds True now. When I first met him 20 years ago, he told me the story, and I met his grandfather, who was a part of this. He was struck by lightning, and he was found by his grandfather, who was a very powerful healer in the town, face down in a puddle, basically. And his grandfather said, "Oh, he's been struck by the absolute light. He's got a gift." And he trained Puma secretly for years, from the age of like 9 until he was 15, when his parents found out, which was, his parents were not very happy that his grandfather was secretly training him in these things, because, his parents were trying to integrate into a more Western kind of mindset. But, these traditions, they can't die. They can be subverted, go underground. In some societies, the shamanic culture was, they tried to kill the shamans, right? And the medicine people. But, that knowledge is out there, and it's in us, it's in our DNA. And depending on who you are and what your agreement is coming into this lifetime, that information can be woken up. And what I believe we're seeing in this evolution revolution process on the planet now for the last umpty years, and probably for another 20, 30 years, is this waking up. There's a mass consciousness, because a lot of the old consciousness is literally leaving the planet in the form of generations that held that kind of consciousness. But what's been waking up in people is a new consciousness. And for some, it looks crazy, and it feels crazy, and it can be terrifying. And, how many shamans, healers, etc., are locked in Bellevue? I have no idea. But I think with some grace and compassion, we might be able to garner some wisdom from those people that we say are mentally ill.
I think there's a beautiful, I'm a big fan of understanding how the mind works, and the relationship of the system with which we are playing within. And on top of that kind of process understanding, I think it's so powerful to have a spiritual understanding on top of that, and the relationship there, which then creates our human experience. And so the relationship of both paths for me it's so fundamental.
And you can't skip the human part.
Absolutely not. I always go back to it.
You can't skip the human part, right? You have to surrender to being human. You have to. It's part of the journey, and it's the way we learn.
I would actually lean into the idea that I've been talking about this recently, and I'll repeat it. So I apologize for people that have heard me say this again in other episodes. But when we awaken to the truth of who we are, it's a remembrance that we are more than human, right? And then the spiritual journey is a remembrance that we are human and spiritual.
Yes. And it certainly does make things easier as you're going through whatever things you've set up for yourself on the path, right? You go, oh, that's a hardship, or that's an opportunity, right? Yeah. So it's a mindfulness practice every minute if you're mindful.
But don't make it hard work. It sounds like a lot of work.
But I think this is where, like, in the Western mind, they've confused the whole Buddhist concept of suffering, because suffering is optional. So
suffering is definitely optional.
And that can be hard for the human mind to grasp. And that's why I love the concept of surrender, because when you're surrendering to the moment, are you really in pain in this moment? Are you suffering in this moment? Pain is going to be there, the physical pain, but suffering is a whole different idea. It's a whole different bag of beans. And that's what we're addicted to. I believe that that humans across the planet, not everybody, are addicted to suffering, and that comes through addiction to chaos and drama, you know.
Well, it also comes from the fact that people don't understand, and it's innocent because
Hmm.
suffering is nothing more than the thinking that you're paying attention to.
Yes.
And if you don't understand that that's all suffering is, then you're going to keep on paying attention to it because people tell you to pay attention to it.
And who teaches that?
Well, society.
But
Society at
it's
large.
repeated. It's repeated by the media. It's repeated by in films and even in songs. You know, I remember pointing out to my teacher Rosa 30 years ago. I said, I'm very attracted to very sad songs. And she said, "Oh, Joe, you should look at that." You know. And I said, "Yeah," and I still love those sad songs. You know, they really stir my heart and crack me open in some good ways. But yeah, we have to
It's
pay attention.
it's really, really fascinating, this whole journey of going deeper within.
I see a comment from Joanne who says, for some, suffering is easier than joy. It gives them permission to be in their victim story. Yes, I mean, we're addicted to being a victim. This is part of what happened with me yesterday. This email I got, I was like, oh my gosh, this being pounded by victim energy through this email. How do I want to respond? How do I want to be with this? So yeah. Hmm.
Anyway, so a bit of a distraction from
A
from
good
the topic at
sidebar,
hand,
man.
but
A good
it it
sidebar.
it leads into this idea that you're bringing up, which is
Idea that
surrendering is,
And you're way
you know,
closer
it.
than for your time.
Oh, wait, someone.
Thanks.
Sorry, Freddie, I'm going to mute you, my friend.
Yeah.
Um, the the idea of surrendering, oftentimes people have this concept that it is a resignation
a
or a
passivity. Yeah.
weakness or
Mhm.
passivity, right? And it isn't. Surrendering is about empowerment.
Yeah. If you listen to Thich Nhat Hanh, who is one of my beloved teachers, who passed away a couple of years ago, he has some great talks, and you can dial these up on YouTube about surrender. You can just type in Thich Nhat Hanh surrender in YouTube, or Pema Chodron, who is another one of my favorite teachers, and it's from a Buddhist perspective, but it's a human spiritual perspective because they talk about, as do people like Eckhart Tolle or Wayne Dyer or Byron Katie and some of these great mystics and masters, it's about your relationship with your thoughts and beliefs, like you were saying, Daniel, because we get so hooked. We get so hooked. And then someone comes along and says, well, you need to surrender to your breath. And you're like, what? Makes no sense to the Western mind, we're so addicted to linear thinking. We're just really stuck in our head. I used to say to, and I still do to students and clients, like, you're living in the attic. Why don't you embody the whole house and see what that's like? And we might have to do that through breath work, through time in nature, through sound healing, through, shamanic journeying, through, deep tissue work, chiropractic work, whatever, because there's so many modalities. 30 years ago, you didn't have the trove of modalities at your fingertips like you do now. So to me, it's like there is no excuse to not be doing some kind of personal development work that is all spiritual as far as I'm concerned. Go to therapy, go to have a massage, go have acupuncture, go to a shaman, go just do the Google, you know?
I brought this up in one of the episodes yesterday, which again is part of the three principles conversation, is this idea that we don't control the thoughts that come to us, but then we use our free will to focus on those thoughts. And so another way of saying this is you don't control the energy that comes to you or that you walk into, but your personal thinking, what you're paying attention to, what you're giving energy to, is within your control. That is within your free will, your choice.
Yeah.
And again, this is part of this idea for me of surrendering into the system as opposed to fighting against it. And the image that came to mind was when I've only done river rafting a couple of times, but whenever you go into a river thing, they'll give you what not to do if you fall over into the river. And one of the things that they talk about is don't flail around. Is just allow yourself to be taken by the river, and you put yourself in a position, but then you just kind of go with the flow until you get to a point where you can then move out. And
I love that metaphor.
there's
In
this aspect of
1991, go ahead.
sorry, let me just kind of finish this thought.
Yes.
There's an aspect of you don't just kind of go into the river as a dead body and just allow it to do whatever it wants to you. So you go into a position where you're alert and present and ready to act, but then you also go with the energy of the river, and you work with the energy of the river to then find a time and a place that's appropriate for you to swim out safely and easily, right?
Yeah.
And of
It's,
course, like any metaphor, there's a lot of holes in it and you can break it really, really easily. But
well, the mind is a terrible thing to taste. Um, but in 1991, I was at the beach in New Jersey, and the water was very rough. There'd been a storm, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, I just want to go in. It was hot, I wanted to go in, and I dove in. And I was standing there. There was a big wave, and I dove under. I came back up, but I didn't see how fast the next very big wave was coming. And I got kind of pulled under, slammed down to the bottom, and I started to struggle because I couldn't get up. I couldn't get to the surface. And all I heard was, become the water. And as soon as I heard that, everything relaxed in me, and boom, I was standing up at the shore. I don't know how long that took, but it was like instantaneous in my mind. It happened so fast. And, we have those moments where, our guides speak to us, and there becomes that surrender again. I had to surrender to the water because I was fighting it, like you were saying. You can't fight it. Nature will teach you so fast how to surrender that, knock down, stand up, here we are. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
going with the flow, a lot of the things that there's a message from Pamela. I'll get to it in a second,
Mhm.
Pamela. There's a reminder that we keep on getting time and time again of this idea of lost it. it was there. I promise it was
Surrender,
there.
it will come back,
It's
maybe.
surrender. It'll come back. It'll come back. So my inner standing is the surrender. My inner standing
Mhm.
is that surrender is akin to making a personal choice to see or feel situations and circumstances in our lives from a greater perspective, to focus not on the limitations, but on the possibilities. Yeah, that's beautiful, Pamela. That is absolutely beautiful. There's an invitation. That's what I was going to talk about. There's an invitation that we are getting more and more, which is about following the energy, following the light. Don't create resistance towards of what's there, and because I'll use the example of I start a new project, and halfway through the project, I kind of lose my motivation. And then I'm like, well, I've already started it and I've got to see it through. And then for the rest of the project, I'm really fighting it
Mm.
because I have it in my mindset that, well, I started this and, I'm going to see this through, and, you know, and we force it. And then it kind of loses the integrity of that inspiration and the love and the flow that we started with. What we're reminded time and time again by different channels is that hypothetically speaking, what I learned by starting that project was why I was inspired to create that project in the first place. I wasn't there to finish the project. That wasn't part of the process. The process was for me to start it. The process was for me to get involved in the creation of it, because that was going to, that what, for whatever the reason, that was going to introduce me to Joe, or it was going to introduce me to someone else, or it was going to give me a skill set that I hadn't thought of before. And so it kind of leads you in different paths. So if we follow the energy, if we just sit and settle down and just kind of
Mm.
say, okay, where am I inspired to move next?
Yeah.
What is my next step? Not my next two steps. Don't worry about the next two steps, because you got to start with the first one, right? It's surrendering to the moment. It's surrendering to this position of, okay, what feels right for me? Oh, you know what? I would love to eat an apple right now. So go eat an apple. If that's what feels in the moment that's inspiring you, do that.
Yeah.
And then when you're done with the apple, check in again, and you'll be guided again. And it's just, it's
Mm-hmm.
literally this idea of going with the flow of life and following the energy, and pursuing your passion, pursuing your inspiration, pursuing your joy, and everything else, all of the details on the back end of it, it'll all be taken care of step by step. And this isn't resigning to someone else's decisions. You're not giving over anything over to anybody, because you are the one that's in control. So you are making the choices at every point, at every step. You are the one that is choosing what feels right for me to do. And when we do that, magic happens, because we end up creating inspired in the moment, aligned with the energy of life, that isn't thinking what's going to happen 3 days from now. What the energy is thinking is, what is right now?
Yeah.
That is where we are, is right
Yeah.
now. What is my next step?
Some of you, Joanne, and others might have heard me tell this story before, but about 11, 12 years ago, around just exactly 12 years ago, a friend of mine died. Um, she was one of my best friends for 26 years. And I woke up shortly after her death, with her death on my mind. And then I realized my body wasn't moving. I couldn't turn my head. I couldn't move my body. It wasn't doing the normal things. And I heard, you have to wait. So I just got very in touch with my breathing, and then my leg moved. And then I was standing next to the bed. And then I was like, well, what's going to happen next? And then I was brushing my teeth, and what's going to happen next? And I would go to the car and I would think, I'm going to drive to Trader Joe's, but I would get in the car and nothing would happen. I didn't start the car. I would just sit there and wait until my arm moved and put the key in the ignition, backed it up. And then I would get to the end of the drive and I would think, okay, well, I go to Trader Joe's this way, and nothing would happen. I would sit at the end of the drive and wait until, which way would I go? Straight, left, right, backwards? I had no idea. And this happened for 5 straight days. And I had, toward the end of it, I was with a friend of mine. And we were in a Trader Joe's, and I just stood there fascinated by all the cans of beans. And I thought, I wanted to cry. Everything looked so beautiful and fresh and new. And I didn't know like what I was going to do. And I just watched my arm move and touch a can and pick it up. And I looked at it and I got very choked up. And I had said to my friend at that point, I said, look, if this goes on much longer, you might have to take me to a hospital or something, because I don't know what this is. But to me now, in retrospect, because I've this episode of this 5 days of surrender, it was a deep surrender. And it wasn't my will. It was like I was waiting for spirit to direct me directly, like go there. Something was moving my body, giving me information, direction. And it was a fascinating, but sometimes very scary thing, because I would be driving, you know what I mean? Driving on the freeways in Southern California when this would come over me, you know, and be like, oh my God, where am I going to go? You know, am I going to go to Seattle now? I don't know. Where am I going to keep driving? What's going to happen? But it's that kind of, you know, in 1996, when I first really got in touch with the word surrender, I was going to do a fire ceremony with my teacher, Lorna Roberts. She's the one who taught me the fire ceremony. And I said, I think I'm going to invite in surrender. And she said, well, do you know what that means? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. And she said, well, think of it as you're surrendering your life, your will, everything to God. And I just collapsed. I thought, oh my gosh, what a concept. And I feel like I've been living that somewhat consciously at times since that fire ceremony, when so much information just came spontaneously at the fire when I said, you know, I want to invite this in, because the whole, you know, we get stuck on definitions of words. And we don't see other possibilities within the word, you know, and the meaning, other possibilities in the meaning. So that's why I love fire ceremonies, by the way, because we get to go delve deeper into the psyche and into the linear mind that wants to kind of name and claim everything, right? So that conditioned mind, the egoic mind, gets to take a little holiday. But yeah, this concept of surrender, and I want to read something by Pema Chodron. It's just 3 lines. As I was thinking about this today, this book of hers, Living Beautifully, popped into my head. And there are 3 lines in here, and it was marked because I've used this before, but as I was meditating on this time today, the 3 lines are: be fully present, feel your heart, and engage the next moment without an agenda, which is something you pretty much brought up, Daniel. So that to me is surrender in a nutshell. It really nails it for me. Because if you're not present, you know, life goes by, you know, life just goes by. What if we really tapped into seeing, like right here, like the light coming through my kitchen window, or the little buzz that's coming from the steam pipe, or, you know, I can hear my dog kind of going behind me, you know, on the floor. And, you know, all these little things that if we're just focused in our head, like, oh my God, that email and what's, you miss so much beauty, so much laughter, so much joy, so much goodness, you know. And then, you know, if we are out of that, it's easy to get hooked in the thinking and the believing that life is hard, or, oh, that person was awful to me, or, oh, you know, I have to go to the office tomorrow and that's going to suck, and blah, you know, all the projecting into the future, and all the, you know, like dwelling in the past. You know, I used to say, you know, we spend a third of our time in the past, a third of it in the future. And then it's like, what's left here in the present moment? Not much of us, you know? So
I would venture to say that it's probably higher percentages, that we spend probably 40 or 40 and a little bit percent in the past, and another 40
maybe
and
I'm
a
being
little bit
generous.
percent in the future, and very little in the present.
Right. Well, again, you know, who's taught us to be present?
Yeah.
You know, religions don't, from my experience, don't really do that.
Yeah.
You know, maybe when we're taught to pray, you know, but for me, Catholicism, I don't remember, in my reading of the Bible as a child, it didn't really teach me. I didn't get that, you know. I was very into Genesis and Revelations, you know, so I would bounce back from the beginning to the end, you know. And I wasn't really getting, you know, even from the teachings of Jesus that were presented at the time, 40, 50 years ago, for me in Catholicism, it wasn't, there was a lot of punishment because it was Old Testament, New Testament, and a lot of the Old Testament is about, from my perspective, a wrathful, vengeful God, which is terrifying, was terrifying to my, and fascinating to my childhood mind, right? Like, oh my God, and the Catholicism was like, now go in that little box and tell this person you can barely see through the screen all the bad things you did, and tell them how many times you did it, It's like, oh my goodness. And then you'll repent,
Can I backtrack a little bit?
How did we get there?
Um,
What's in that?
I want to change subject a little bit, and it's related to something that you said that again I want to bring up, which
Mhm.
is this idea that surrender is surrendering over to God, right? And I'm using that word on purpose, in that
Yes.
language on purpose.
Yeah.
Now, I am of the focus in my life where I am learning to not give my power away to anybody or anything. And so, how does this play in, right? And so, what I'm about to share is not going to be anything new to some of the people that are listening, but others that are listening might be like, wait, what are you talking about? One way that you can look at this, if you want to internalize it, as opposed to giving your power away, surrendering to something other than yourself, is to recognize that you are surrendering to the higher self within you, your inner connection to the energy of all that is. You are surrendering to the all-knowing intelligence that exists within you, which is your personalized perception of self at a spiritual level, which is aware of the fact that it is also God, but
Mhm.
it is also you. And so there's this bridge between you and this higher entity of God that exists within the metaphor and the mythology that we're creating about our spirituality, which is this aspect of your higher self. The higher self is a direct connection to God, and it is aware that it is God. But yet, at the same time, it's still playing as a perception of you. And so, by going within and allowing yourself to surrender to the higher intelligence of yourself, you are surrendering to the higher intelligence of whatever people refer to as God.
Yeah, Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, she calls that God, energy, source, universe, a good orderly direction. And for me, when I did The Artist's Way in 1995, that worked for me very well because there was a long time where if someone said God to me, I was like, ugh, I still had that childhood image and, you know, the punishment thing inside me. It was very hard to say God, but thankfully I have a friend who's a minister and he invited me to do a blessing of his church in Connecticut in the late 2000s. And I was still like not comfortable with the word God. And for some reason, I hadn't taken communion in the Catholic Church in a very long time. And I did with him, but they had all the ministers lined up, and you could, after you, if you're familiar with that Christian, Eucharist thing, you could go and talk to or be ministered by, in the kindest way, any of the ministers that were lined up to give you the Eucharist. And I went to my friend George, and he offered me that, and I did that, and he just opened his arms, and I just fell into his arms sobbing, and that totally changed it for me. I could say God again. because I felt so embraced and welcomed by that energy in a church in a way that I'd never felt before. Like that love, to me, God is love or nature or whatever, beauty, source, the universe, great mystery. They're all interchangeable for me now, you know. I didn't always see God as me. I saw God as this other thing that was waiting to judge me. So even when Lorna said that to me, it's you're surrendering to God, to source, universe, great spirit. It was, I had to take God out of what she'd said to have it work for me. But now I can say God in that, story. But yeah, I mean, again, we're not taught to surrender to our own brilliance. We're not taught to surrender to our own beauty. We're not taught to surrender to the fact that, we have a brilliance bubbling up inside of us, an effervescence of vitality. No one, who tells us that? Who teaches us that? What school does that? Show me. Because they probably exist, and there are teachers out there who, certainly I had teachers in elementary school, et cetera, who recognized a brilliance, right? Thank God. Not the shamanic stuff, but an artistic side, or encouraged my writing, or I hadn't 3 years of accounting in high school. I don't know how that happened, but because I'm not always comfortable using that side of my brain, but I can do it, but you know we can listen to that inner voice and trust it now. Many of us, it's hard sometimes. It can be hard. But, again, it's a surrender over and over again. It's a mindfulness practice. That's all it is. It's being in the present moment enough to recognize your own genius, your own light. And, I'm just like, please, I long for the day where we see educators and an education system where this stuff is cultivated, because we've taken art out of many public schools. We've taken, physical education out of many public schools, and those were lifelines for me, and often in school, that kind of expression. And we can't expect there's so much regimenting of ourselves, and then we go to schools, or then we go to work, and it's all regiment. We don't get a break, and part of the surrendering to healing is taking a break, really taking a break. Like, don't really have a vacation. Don't like go on vacation and like, well, we're going on this tour, and then we're doing this, and then we're doing that, and then we're going to do this. And you come back from vacation, you're like, oh my God, I have to go back to work tomorrow. I'm so freaking tired. It's like, oh, just go and rest and observe and be. That's why I would love to go to Deer Park Monastery, Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in San Diego, because you have walking meditation, you have eating in silence, and you're encouraged to really chew your food, for gosh sakes, to be with each other, to look people in the eye, to just take your time, slow down. So, and that can be a challenge for so many people. And that's part of the surrender. And I think it does start with the breath. If you can start there, if you can at least start with your breath.
So as always, to people that are listening live, feel free to, raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or put a comment in the chat, interact with us however you wish. The energy feels like it's shifting.
Yes.
But I don't know yet where. Do you?
I was just wondering if you wanted to, because I channel Yogananda sometimes.
Okay.
So I didn't know much about Yogananda Paramahansa before I moved to Encinitas, California, in northern, on the coast in northern, North County, San Diego. But I would go to his meditation gardens there, because he has a hermitage there. And one of the first times I was there, I was sitting on a bench meditating, overlooking the ocean, and I felt this hand on my shoulder, and I turned around and no one was there, and I heard, "It is me, my child, Yogananda." So ever since then, he's been coming to me, but I think maybe we can get a message about surrender from Yogananda, which might be helpful. How about that? Yeah?
Perfect. Sounds good.
Okay, let's go there. Let me just, a little crystal that I like to use here. So let's see what Yogananda has to say about surrender, the art and heart, the concept, the idea, the beauty of surrender. Yeah. So what he wants to express is that we're spot on. We've really nailed it in our dialoguing. And that is in part thanks to the consciousness of everyone tuning in here, because this is what happens. We get to focus on a topic, right? We have an intention. The intention was to talk about surrender, and everything that we did so far was to bring it into that funnel of the consciousness of surrender. So that's where we are. And it's important now, apparently, to really pay attention to when we are not, when we are in our resistance, like you spoke very gracefully about, Daniel, when we are resisting, when we are clenching our fist, which is an interesting thing that humans do in the world, is clench their fist and clench their jaw and hold the energy tightly instead of surrendering to the breath. The humans love to hold on to ideas and concepts and anger and resentment and even joy instead of letting that flow. Holding on is not surrender by any stretch of anyone's imagination. So being present in the moment is very important. It's vital to the work, the art, the heart of surrender. You've got to be here now. You've got to check in and notice when you're drifting off, or notice where your mind is taking you, because your mind will take you on the peace train or the crazy train. Which rail line would you like to ride on more often, right? Get your ticket for the peace train and pick your seat, and then just sit there mindfully with your breath, noticing your emotions, noticing what's going on with your physical body, and just take the journey, take the ride on that train and see where it takes you, because you will have a much more joyful experience on the earth plane than on that other train. So let me see if there's anything else from Yogananda. So when Yogananda comes in for me, it's often about how we move in the world, where we're going, how we are walking our path. So this concept of surrender, if you can really take it in, digest it, see how that moves you in your daily life, see how it takes you out of your chair and walks you to the kitchen, and instead of grabbing a Pepsi, you grab water. See how it, instead of it taking you to McDonald's, it takes you to the farmer's market, and you choose something that comes from the earth to digest. And see how you are every moment when you are in that practice of surrender. You know, it's often like, when we see children who are resisting going to bed and going to sleep, they fight, right? They fight, they throw tantrums because they're not surrendering to what their body wants them to do, which is sleep, right? And adults do it too. We say, oh, just a little more on the computer. Just, oh, let me get to the end of this movie. Oh, you know, instead of just falling asleep. surrendering to that mindfulness practice, which is a really great meditation. Sleep is a great meditation. So, yeah, the art and heart of paying attention really is surrender. Okay, that's all from Yogananda.
There was an image that came to mind as that message was coming through, which is, I think I probably have it saved somewhere. This was years ago, probably about 10 years ago now. I was sent an image, or I came across it in Facebook, of two people on a train. And on the one side of the train, and the train was going around a mountain. And on the outside of the train, there was this beautiful vista, bright sunny day, incredible landscape, everything was just gorgeous. And there's this woman that is looking out the window, smiling in joy. On the inside of the train, which is on the side of the mountain, on the rocks that basically are literally like that close to the edge of the train, so there's no visibility, there was a guy who was looking down into the darkness and looked miserable. And that image came to mind because this is the choice. This is the two trains. You can choose which side of the train to be on.
Yeah,
You can choose to be on the sunny side, or you can choose to be on the dark side. You can choose to be on the side where you can see the beautiful vista, or you can choose to be on the side where your visibility is really hindered and restricted.
yeah.
So that image came to mind. There's something that I want to bring up, which might be a bit of a challenge. Or an invitation for everyone that's here. A lot of us, let me personalize this. I am learning to use the word resistance differently, because resistance has a negative connotation. A lot of people think of resistance as being bad. In fact, I just saw a quote from one of these spiritual teachers that the world thinks is wonderful, that talked about how resistance is bad. And again, I've seen things of this teacher that have made me question how clearly does he actually see things. But nonetheless, this is what I want to talk about, because what Joe was using resistance for was fighting against. The child that is fighting against the idea of going to bed. They're not resisting going to bed, they're fighting against it. Resistance is an aspect that is a beautiful, incredible, powerful gift that we have, that our human has, that our soul has, to slow us down. Resistance is a border where we are saying, I'm not ready yet. I need more time. I need more intelligence. I need more wisdom. I need more understanding. I need more of a foundation before I'm ready to cross that path. And so resistance is a beautiful, powerful gift. When people in the spiritual communities use the word resistance in a lot of situations, what they're referring to is this impulse to fight against the energy, to go against it. And so I wanted to kind of bring that up just as a topic to reflect on, and to kind of think about resistance as not being a bad thing. I love the idea of this idea of surrender is an interesting concept for me, because the word itself is one of those words that I don't remember. I have a hard time remembering what's that word. It's a word that escapes me, and right, so clearly I've reflected on this quite a lot, is why is this word so difficult for me to remember when I want to use it? What's that word again? I can't remember what that word is. It's something about allowing, it's something about letting go, but what's that word? this idea of surrender, it is such a, and I think that it's what I started with, right? In our conversation, it's what I started with. I had this idea that the idea of surrender was a weakness. It's giving up. And what I'm learning over the last, 10 years is that surrendering is a letting go of the fight. That's what surrendering is letting go of the fight. It's letting go of the fight against what is flowing with you or around you or within you, or, that's what surrendering is. It's about letting go of the fight against fill in the blank. And it's an empowerment. It's not a weakness, and it's not a sign of giving up. It's a sign of being ready to step into. So that's what kind of came to me while you were sharing your message. Something that Katie asked a question up top that I want to kind of bring up to the conversation, which is how are some ideas how to practice surrender? So what are some ideas for how we can practice surrender? And I will just say my 2 cents and then I'll turn it over to you. My 2 cents is, whenever I hear the word practice, I hear the word work, because that's my association. A practice for me is a lot of work, and that's the last thing that I want to do personally. So a lot of what I do is I play with this concept of allowing, of being, not from a place of work and effort, but of awareness and consciousness. Over to you, Joe.
Well, probably not much more to add, but to just point out that paying attention to your breath, paying attention to your emotions, paying attention to what's happening in your body, paying attention to, allowing yourself to rest, being in that opportunity for healing that might not occur to you because the default might be, well, I have a headache, so I'm going to take this pill that the doctor prescribed. That's what I do. Instead of being with that discomfort in a different way, to breathe into, to ask it questions, because the conditioning leads to something and the surrender could lead to something else, right? So to be aware that you have options and opportunities, right? And that, again, that deep listening that I feel is so lacking sometimes, because we want to say something or we want to be doing something, and the art of listening to ourselves is something that I think that we could offer the world more of, to be in that kind of stillness and presence with ourselves, so it's a deep presence that leads to the surrender. So I would start with your breath and see where that takes you, paying attention to the in-breath and the out-breath, and the in-breath and the out-breath, and see where that leads you. That's always my default when I hear my mind racing around in some story, or then, it's stirring up uncomfortable emotions. I stand still wherever I am, often, even if it's on the street in New York. I tend to step off to the side so I don't piss anyone off. But, so if I'm standing, on the sidewalk in New York and, you know, toward the curb or the building, you know that I'm probably having a moment of just, you know, slowing myself down so I don't get caught in a spiral. Which then it all leads to those other things that you become aware of the clouds or the, you know, the nuances of the sky or wind that maybe you didn't know was even happening, or anything, a blade of grass. You know, you start to observe things in a very different way. And it starts for me, with, am I breathing? How deeply am I breathing? Because I had teachers that would say, you're not breathing. You know, are you breathing? Are you breathing? How? You know, and those were my shamanic teachers, but also I was taking classes, voice classes for diction and everything in the early 90s. And I had a teacher who, we would sit in a circle at the beginning of class to do our exercises with our tongue and our jaw and everything. And she turned to me at one of the first classes and went, "You're not breathing." And I went, "Yes, I am." She said, "You're breathing. It's all up here." She said, "And it's so shallow." She said, "I can hear it. I'm trained for this." And she said, "You know, you got to breathe into your belly. What are you afraid of?" And I was like, what is she saying to me? You know, I was like, ah, but she was so right, because when you start to breathe more deeply, you can contact emotions that might be kind of like stuffed down there. You start to get in touch with things through your breath that could help open you up and wake you up and shake you up in the best ways, right? So I would start there with the breath. Most of my teaching is like, good, pay attention to your breathing, pay attention to your breathing, pay attention to your breathing, because that's the portal, you know, that's the portal for so much of this.
One of the things that there's two things that I want to add to this. One is that by focusing on your breathing, it brings you into your present. It's really hard to focus on your breathing and be somewhere else other than in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I want to add
Mm-hmm.
is observation and being aware, being conscious of is an incredible skill set that we can strengthen. The one little cautionary tale with this is to also be conscious of non-judgmentally observing, not bringing in the judgment of, oh, there I am doing this again, and oh, I can't do this right, or I can't, it's so all of the judgment, all of the things that, again, society has taught us to focus on, our lack, our limitation, our inabilities, our weaknesses, our challenges, all of these things, they can easily crop up when we become observant of things. We can judge them as bad.
And we can also judge them as bad and then question that judgment. You know, is that really true, right? Is what I just called bad or negative or awful or you know, sometimes, as was the case yesterday after I read this email that came flying into my inbox, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to walk around the apartment right now and think all the thoughts. I'm going to let all the crap come up. I'm going to let myself hear all the things that, you know, that I might in another time in my life just spew out with not much love at all and kindness. And I'm just going to think those thoughts, and then I'm going to see what happens. I'm just going to let it come. And that's what I did. I walked around the apartment, not very long. And that was a beautiful thing to notice. It was over very fast. And I think that might have come from giving myself permission and surrendering to, I'm just going to let it come. And it was over.
One of the recommendations that I've heard from one of the channels that I listen to regularly is when you find yourself in a place where
Mm.
you are disconnected from the truth of who you are, just notice it. Just notice when you're not at your best. Notice when you're not connected.
Yeah.
But it's just a noticing. It is not a judgment of it. It is not a, oh, I need to do, or I haven't done, or it is literally just, oh, look, I'm disconnected. Okay. All right. Well, let me take some breaths.
There's so much crossover in like the Buddhist teachings and shamanic, um, I don't want to call them shamanic teachings, I don't know, wisdom. Um, and like the work of Byron Katie or Eckhart Tolle or some of these other people that, and for someone like Byron Katie, she had no background in any kind of religion or spiritual practice at all. It was just boom, she, basically a roach woke her up. That's the short version. But because again, we all have that, the seed of it in us. We all have it in there, and it just needs some water and light. And I think the breath can really be the water and the light. And I
Second time,
do think it's good at times to really surrender to the Mishigosh, because that helps us notice that we're in the Mishigosh. We're in that, we're playing around in the garbage dump again. Okay, is this fun? Maybe for a little while.
sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes it's helpful,
We can learn a lot from,
you know,
playing in the dumpster.
but it's about being conscious of being in a dumpster, right?
Oh,
It's
I'm in the
like, oh,
dumpster. Look at me in the dumpster.
and like you did yesterday was, okay, I'm actually going to jump in the dumpster because I need to experience this. I need to see what comes through the dumpster.
Yeah.
But it's a conscious being in that place.
Yes. There has to be a
There's an
consciousness if we want
awareness and
to
a
evolve.
consciousness of it, right?
Yes. And we don't know what's going to wake us up. We don't know. We have no idea. And that's the beauty of life, right? We just walk down the street and boom. I remember walking out in the early days, maybe 34, 35 years ago in Soho. And I was just like lost in my thoughts. And for some reason, I stepped away from the building. And what happened next was the fire escape came crashing down. And I had just, as I was approaching that spot, I kind of woke up from that, like the mishigosh in my head and went, oh, I just let spirit move me away from that because very likely that would have come crashing down on me instead of just to the sidewalk. So it was a very good moment of waking me up in 1990 or whatever year that was. So, and we could take moments like that and make it really dramatic. Oh, I was almost killed by a fire escape that collapsed. I didn't go there happily, and it would have been okay if I did, but it didn't. The memory of that crops up. Stay away from that. Did you see the comment? I'm gonna stay away from that. That is brilliant. Oh, thank you. That is so good. Oh my gosh. I love that.
And so for people that are
Yes,
listening,
love
and Joe is laughing so hard that his pronunciation might not have been understood.
that. Oh.
Pamela put a comment in the chat saying "Stairway from Heaven," maybe? Question mark.
Oh, thank you, Pamela. That's brilliant. Oh my goodness, thank you.
A couple of times now I've had the thought pop in my head of let's explore the breath a bit more.
Mm.
And this is an area that I'm actually interested in exploring myself because I have this question. Because people talk about how breath is life, our connection to our humanity and to our spirituality is breath. what keeps, and I even heard somebody say that what keeps us alive is our breath.
Yes, if you're, I've said this many times, if you're not
And what
breathing,
about the
you're not
heart? Does
living.
the heart not? Right?
The
Because
heart
somebody
also
said
doesn't.
when you die, you stop breathing. Yeah, but when you die, your heart stops beating too. So why isn't it that the heart is what's keeping you alive? And
Mm.
that the heart is what's connecting you. And so I'm curious, right? The breath is talked about so often in a lot of spiritual communities across a number of different metaphors and platforms and modalities and ideas and different even levels of awakening. People talk about breath in different ways. And so breath is something that I'm curious to explore a bit more within my own journey to again get a deeper appreciation for this idea that breath is my connection with my spirituality or with the who I am of what I am or whatever phrase you want to use.
Or, the breath connects me to my heart, because my experience has been when I'm aware of my breath, I can be more aware of my heartbeat. I can like feel it. I can hear it. It's louder to me. I can't hear or feel my heart, in the way that I am, that at least for now, um, until I slow down enough and go, oh, there's my heart beating, right? But that's a great practice. I think I can add this in to a routine of really being conscious of the heart. What if that were something you experimented with for 24 hours or 2 minutes and just said, oh, my heart, oh, my heart, I, oh, my heart is beating. Because we just take it for granted. We take for granted that we are breathing because we're alive, or that, well, my heart must be beating. Do we even say this to ourselves? Well, my heart seems to be beating, so I guess I'm alive. I don't know. But, you know, yeah.
What I find really interesting about the discussion between the heart and the breath is I am not consciously able to manipulate my heart easily. And I'll put easily in there because we can change the heart, right? But
Well, our blood pressure can change if we are really
yeah.
conscious of our breathing.
And so this idea that for me, the heart is more of the unconscious energy that keeps me alive. For me, that's the core of my aliveness is my heart. Now, what's fascinating with the breath is that the breath is both automatic and also conscious because it is probably the only aspect within our bodies that functions on its own, but yet we can also manipulate.
Mm.
Because I can't manipulate my digestion consciously. I can. So again, I'm not saying that we don't have the ability to change any aspect of our bodies, but you know what I'm getting to, right? Is that
Yes,
on a very
I do.
easy kind of way of interacting with our bodies, I can't change my bowels. I can't change my digestive system. I can't change my immune system, but I can change my breath. I can consciously stop breathing.
There are practices of medical, intuitive, who was it? Can't remember, but someone I knew who had for years, um, what is that skin condition? She worked with a breath practitioner to change the outbreaks that she had of, what is that skin condition? It can be really painful. Skin cracks and peels.
Hmm.
Um,
I,
and that
I know what
worked
you're
for
talking
her.
about, but the word is escaping me
Yeah,
too.
same. Um, and that worked for her for a long time. And then she got away from that, and you know, the skin erupted again. But eczema, thank you. Thank you, yes. Um, but who knows what your body could do?
what's really interesting about this, which is again, it's what's fresh for me, literally in the moment, is this idea that breath is the one of the big things of our body that I can consciously change in the moment. And yet it is through breath that we change everything else. And you kind of talked about it, you alluded to it, that we can change our blood pressure through our breathing. We can affect our heart rate through our blood, through our breathing, right? I remember
And
doing,
probably, you know, and I'm sure we could do the Google and find studies that show that the immune system can be altered through conscious breathing.
yeah. And so it's this idea that we have, again, I love this concept that, my heart that's what's keeping me alive. That is, for me, the heart is the core of my being, of everything about me is my heart. And my breath is the way that I can interact with my body at a very visceral level. And I love that idea. I'd never connected the two before.
When I was a kid, I played soccer, and I have very clear memories of the coach telling us how to breathe, because he was a runner. So we would have to run laps around the fields, these giant fields. And I remember him very close as he would be running past us, encouraging us, to pay attention to our breathing and breathe in through your nose and do this. And I was like, oh, it works. And if I ran for years, and you fall into a rhythm with your breathing. You fall into a rhythm with your breathing as a runner, as a swimmer. Um, it's vital, that you have a relationship with your breath as an athlete, in yoga, and any form of exercise. You have to pay attention to your breath. There has to be the cycle. You can count your breaths when you're working out, you're swimming or running. It's a way to you fall into a kind of meditative state, and it becomes that you follow this beautiful rhythm that helps make it seem like you you're not fighting your body, right? You're falling into a beautiful rhythm with it. So
I remember in one of my martial arts trainings, the teacher, after we would do this big workout, he would always say, after when we were all exhausted and panting and barely able to breathe, he would just say, breathe and slow down. Just slow down your system. Come back to being in a relaxed state. Come back to being in a place of presence. Come back to, as opposed to, he was just like, slow down your breath, slow down your system. So take deeper breaths and hold them and slow them down. But Sally brings up a good point, which is you can change your heart rate by thinking about it too without changing your breath. And what I responded to was, I bet you when that happens, your breath changes accordingly as well.
mm,
I mean,
yeah.
I've never tested it, but I would imagine that if you think about slowing down your heart, I would imagine that your breath would shift accordingly.
Well, this is, we talk about the power of the mind, right? The mind, who's in charge here, you know, um, is it our thoughts, or can we do something about that, right? So that we're not controlled by our habitual conditioned thinking. So, and then we go back to surrender, right? We go back to surrender. So, yeah, love that. Yeah. Power of the mind. I'm just clicking on so I can see the chat differently now. So it's not, yeah. Heart head connection. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then again, we create space to surrender to our own wisdom. right? This innate brilliance in us, it just it opens up a portal in us where this so much possibility lives. We can see the limitlessness of ourselves and the universe. Yeah. Hmm. I wonder, really, I really wonder, and I'm sure you can find these on YouTube where you're really tuned into the heart in meditation. You really just, the mind gets focused very deeply on the heart, the pulse of it, the sensation of it. You really get to and see how you can change things with that, with a 30-day heart meditation. What would that be like, Joe? Placebo with all trials is acknowledgement that we can contribute to our own healing to some extent. Yes, Sally agreed. The mind is so powerful.
It's that, speaking of that, it's, the placebo is the benchmark for medicine to actually be brought to the market.
Mm.
If a medicine isn't better than the placebo effect, they don't continue it, or they shift it, or it's not approved. So the medicine needs to be better than the placebo effect. But anyway,
and faster, probably.
I want to bring this back to surrender. So we started a little late, so I'm okay going over a little bit, but I kind of wanted to bring it back to surrender before the end of the conversation. And so I wanted to invite you, Joe, to say something else about surrender that hasn't already been said.
So as what popped up as soon as you said that was surrender is love.
Want to elaborate on that?
No, I'm going to let that stir. Surrender is love. Maybe we could you could amend it a little bit by saying surrender is an act of love. What is Sally saying here in the comments? I didn't really understand what heart space was until I did a meditation and they got me actually into my own heart, looking at it inside. Yeah. Surrender is love. I'll leave you with that. I'll go meditate on that.
For 30 days.
For 30 days. But surrender, and again, you could, love equals God equals spirit equals mystery, great mystery, whatever. So surrender is love.
So if people are interested in working with you, playing with you, exploring with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
The best way would be to email me. I'm going to type can I do this? Can I see? I'm going to type my, yeah, there we go. Email in the chat. Everyone can see that. That's the best way to get in touch with me is through email. And in the subject heading, you could say something like from Daniel's group or something, or question or something that really makes me see it so that I don't go, is this spam? Why is this coming in? What is this? Because if you're like me and you get a lot of emails and I have to check my own private stuff, plus I have a lot of emails that come in through my office, I I want to see a subject heading that makes me go, oh, you know. So,
And
that,
so for people that are listening, joemonkman@gmail.com. And again, you can get the information from the website as well.
yes,
But
it's in there.
joemonkman@gmail.com.
It's in there. It's in there multiple times on the webpage because you also put it in the
And
invitation.
the invitation.
Yeah.
And so the invitation as well is an opportunity for you to work with Joe for a shamanic healing session, 60 minutes for a reduced rate. And that offer is good until the end of March. So
Yeah. Which
so
is not that far away now. It's weird. February 4th. How did that happen? 2024, people. 2024. Oh my goodness.
so thank you for coming to play, Joe. Always a fun
You're
conversation.
welcome. Shall we read Sally's final comment? Is I often surrender to a glass of wine. That's love. I love the humor bouncing around in this space today. That's good. Yeah.
So thank you guys for being here,
Thank
both
you.
in person and virtually. Those listening
Yeah.
to the recording, thank you for being here. And Joe, thanks for coming to play. As
Thank
always,
you.
fun conversation.
Yeah.
And
Playground.
coming up next is Susan Kennard. She'll be at the top of the hour. So those of you that can, I will see you then.
Hmm.
And I will leave you with being spirit, being human, and simply being from love.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for being part of this incredible experience. We hope that this session has inspired a new level of understanding within you, allowing you to expand more easily into the essence of your true self and become an even more powerful alchemist in your own life. We invite you to listen to the session again and again in order to go deeper each time and expand even more. Have it be via the replays or the unlimited access package. If you have enjoyed being part of this event, we invite you to tell your friends so that they can join us in the future. We are grateful that you are here, and we thank you for co-creating this experience with us. Until next time, we leave you with being spirit, being human, and simply being from love.